Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. So we've got chickens, and a lot of people have asked how you go about caring for your chickens. I did a basic introduction a few months ago on keeping chickens, and what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover basic chicken coop maintenance and how much you should feed your chickens and how to look after your chickens while you've got them. So when it comes to the chickens, we need to give them a good clean. We need to give the bedding a good clean inside the coop. So when you look for coop design, it's really important to have something that's really easy to clean. And with us, our coop's homemade, and you'll have seen the videos that I did. I did a whole series on how I made this from reclaimed timber and an old wardrobe that I found. And it's just an old wardrobe that's been turned on its side. Really easy to clean. All we do is we'll come in and just literally rake everything out straight into the wheelbarrow. Just to protect the wood a little bit, I've put a couple of bits of plastic in, and this is all packaging material. So it's just from when I bought some furniture before. It just makes life a lot easier to clean. I mean, you'll always end up with dust and stuff at the bottom of the plastic, but as long as the manure's not settling on the bottom, it's not going to rot the wood. But for a lot of people, they'll come in and do daily pooper scoops. So I don't get around to doing it every day. Every now and then I'll come in, during the week. Maybe a couple of times during the week, I'll come in and I'll just make sure I clean out the big lumpy bits. And if I'm really stretched for time, I'll remove the nasty bits underneath the roosting perches. I'll scoop that out once a week if I'm really pushed for time and I can't give it a proper deep clean, and then I'll put a fresh layer of bedding over the top, and that'll buy me enough time to last another week when I've got enough time to give it a proper deep clean like this. And then once every couple of months I'll come in with a hose pipe and I'll wash this whole thing out and give it a proper clean, and sometimes even get a little bit of soap, wash it with a little bit of soapy water, and that'll just help make sure that I don't end up with parasite buildups. It's nice that I'm able to do this in the new coop where I've got enough space to be able to move about. The rooster's not liking us messing about in here. He's making his territory known. See, I've just got a bag with sawdust in, and this is all sort of shavings and sawdust from when I chop my wood for the wood burner. So anytime I'm chopping wood, whatever's left off the chainsaw, I'm sweeping that up, bagging it, putting it into containers and using that as bedding for my chickens. So it's all free material. So just rake it all into place, and now that's a good 2-inch layer of bedding on there. Yeah, so that's going to be absolutely perfect for them to lay down on. It's going to be fresh bedding for them for a week. We won't have to worry about it. Now when it comes to the floor of the run, you know what I do with this floor. I try and use this as a compost pile. Now, one of the best methods of compost that you can make is chicken compost. Now look at this stuff. So if you look down here, I've got loads and loads of deep wood chip on here, and I brought my compost sifter into here so I can just quickly come in here with the wheelbarrow, pick everything off the floor straight here, sift it all off, and then all the big stuff's left in here. I don't have to worry about sorting it out outside and then bringing it back in, and then just top it up with a fresh layer of wood chip, any sort of weeds that we get. So when we get couch grass and things that are really hard to compost, they get thrown in here, and the chickens make light work of them. Weed seeds, chickens, they'll sort that out without any issue at all. With a system like this, in about 6 weeks, you can generate about a ton bag full of compost. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, our flock's at the smallest it's ever been. It's down to about 3 chickens at the minute and 1 rooster. But we've got more on the way. We've got some eggs in the incubator, and we've got 3 chicks that have hatched, and I'll show you those in a few minutes. So in terms of feed, this is what we feed our chickens. Now, What I do is I buy layers pellets and I buy mixed corn, and I mix them together. So I'll put in 50-50 mixed corn and layers pellets. I know some people like to use mixed corn as a treat and layers pellets as the main food, but I like to give them a little bit of a mix and let them choose what they're going to eat. And that way, getting roses flat thrown on me. But anyway, my mum's raised chickens since she was a little girl, and she's never used layers pellets. It's always been either whole grain, so not even mixed corn. It's been like rice in the husks, wheat in the husks. So when you're feeding your chickens with this kind of dry food, you lose a lot of material in the crumbs and stuff that turns into dust. So rather than that, if you add in a bit of water into the feed, the chickens, especially in summertime, it's a lot easier for them to eat, and it's a lot easier for them to digest, and it keeps them, and it helps keep them cool, and it helps get that water on board as well, and it doesn't allow your food to go to waste. So 120 grams of chicken food a day for 3 or 4 adult chickens, that's a couple of handfuls. That's about it for a day. Yeah, that's a few handfuls. That's about it for a day. You don't need more than that, especially if they're free ranging. Now, if they're free ranging, you can cut down your feed massively. Remember, if you overfeed your chickens, they're less likely to produce a lot of eggs. Now, layers pellets are bred, or layers pellets are made ideal mix to feed your chickens enough for them to be able to produce like a farm chicken to be able to produce. We're not trying to replicate here what the factory farmers do, so we're mixing in the food here, but we're also free ranging. And if we can't free range, then what we're doing is we're mowing the grass, and we're chucking the grass clippings in there, we're chucking weeds in there, we're chucking off clippings of, you know, if we're picking spinach and spinach has got a bit of beet leaf miner or something like that, that's going in there. So they're getting the leaf from the spinach, and they're getting the protein from the insects that we're throwing in there as well. I found a colony of ants in one of my containers that went in there, so there was loads of, you know, ant eggs, and the chickens were feasting on that. So you can find lots of ways of finding food for free to feed your chickens, and boosting your chickens' protein level up that way. So when I talk about chickens in the garden, they're not just a source of eggs, and they're not just a source of meat for people who produce meat birds. But this is really precious to us, and this is absolutely essential for our garden's fertility. So all of this chicken manure, we've got loads of chicken manure in here, we've got sawdust, we've got straw, we've got a good mix of bedding in here. You know, add a bit of water to that, and that'll heat up in no time and turn into really rich compost really quickly. But what I like to do with this is I like to add it to my worm bin and let the worms break it down and turn it into really good vermicompost. So that's what's going to end up with this. It's going to all end up in my worm bin right now. If it was winter, then I wouldn't mind mulching my beds with this, because this would be perfectly fine to mulch your beds with. It's not too rich in nitrogen, it's not extremely hot, because there's a good level of carbon in there. It's just a compost pile that you're putting onto your beds, so that would be absolutely fine to put onto a bed. It's not like spreading fresh manure like the factory farmers tend to do and overwhelm the fields and overwhelm the streams. That's not what this would do. If you can free range your chickens, I mean, when you're trying to grow food and you let your chickens out, they can be one of the most destructive things in the world. They'll completely wreck the garden if you let them. And that's one of the things that they've just done now. They've come in, and if you look at my daisies, look at the 2 big gaps that they've just created in the middle of my daisy patch. Within a few minutes of them being outside, that's what they've done. So they can be absolutely, yeah, they can really harm things if you let them. I mean, this is a patch of garden that's really fertile. We've got onion seedlings here, we've got spinach, I had dwarf French beans, but the dwarf French beans, everything's just been completely decimated by the chickens. It's been replanted twice this year, and the second planting, this is what they've done to it in no time at all. So if you do let them out, especially when you're growing stuff, you've got to be careful. But in winter time, let them out, let them into the garden, because they're going to turn everything up, and they're going to really break down pest cycles. They'll eat eggs, they'll scratch the surface, they'll expose different insects, and they'll stop pests attacking your crops next year. So that's one of the things that you want to do, is use your chickens rather than just as eggs and meat to add additional benefits for your garden, add multiple layers of benefits to your garden. So breaking down pest cycles, adding fertility, turning over your soil, aerating your soil, you know, all of these kind of things the chickens can do for you, and it's really important. Let them do it, and it's good for them. They'll get a good life out of it, and you'll get loads and loads of benefit from it. Let me go and show you the young chicks that we've hatched out. So we've had the little chicks out sunbathing today, and they're about to go in, and we're just bedding them on newspaper at the moment. They're just over a week old because it's quite hot. They're out during the day when we're out, so they can get a little bit of fresh air and a little bit of sun. Come here, you. Look at this. So yeah, I love the colour of that. We're going to get these guys back in because it's getting a bit late on and the sun's gone down, so it's going to start getting cold soon. Now with young chicks like this, they're going to need at least 6 weeks of heat. So if it's not hot like it is at the moment, they're going to need somewhere sheltered, somewhere under a heat lamp, because it's still quite warm and it's still quite, the temperatures at night time are still quite hot in the house. That's where they normally are. So we just use a table lamp with an extra powerful bulb in there. But the other thing that we sometimes use is I stick them under my grow lights. So the same grow lights that I use for growing my plants, I use for growing my chickens, because those grow lights give off a tremendous amount of heat, and they're super efficient with the fact that they're LEDs, but they do give off that heat, and it's perfect for these chicks. So we're going to get these guys inside. They've had a nice clean. With chicks, you need something called chick crumb. It's a lot smaller, and it's got a higher protein content compared to layers pellets. So layers pellets have about 15 to 16% protein content, whereas chick crumb has 19 to 20% protein, just to help them grow. And the way we feed our chicks is we let them feed as much as they want. So we'll change that plate. So we'll put a little bit in, let them change it, especially at this age. And the way we're raising them, they can be quite messy. So they'll eat a load from there, and then they'll poo in it and they'll scratch it up and they'll make a mess of it. You can use hanging feeders and all that sort of thing, but with a simple setup like this, it's not always practical. And for the water, we use something significantly smaller, something significantly shallower, and you only want a tiny bit of water in. If you want to give the water in with the feed, you can do, mix the water, soak the feed in water and feed them like that, and they'll eat that. But if you want to give them water separately, be careful, because one of the things, especially with really young chicks, is what can happen is they can end up drowning in a dish of water very easily. It doesn't take long for a chick like this to drown, so just be careful. Just really do be careful. And you can see with these, let me get this guy up. Come here. You can see his real feathers are coming on. So until all this down has disappeared and they've got the real feathers on, they're going to still need lights. They're going to still need heat. So at the moment they're fine in here. We're going to get them under the grow lights and get them warmed up. But with chicks, make sure you're changing their feed and changing their water very regularly. It is an intensive process the way we do it. You can use hangers, you can use water feeders and stuff, which will make your life a lot easier, and it will cut down on the work that you're having to do. For me, it's all about finding an excuse to get in and around the animals. Yeah, getting them used to being handled, getting them used to you, getting them used to knowing you. I think that's important. It builds a relationship, not just with the birds, but it builds a relationship with you, an appreciation for where your food and where the animals in your garden come from. So it's starting to get a little bit late, so the chickens are getting up into the coop. But these chicks, they have so much character. They have all their own little characters. Like this one, she's absolutely batty as hell. She's crazy as anything. She'll find the smallest gap to get out of, and she'll just squeeze between your legs and get out of the chicken coop. And she's the one who, when everyone else is going in one direction, she'll go in an opposite direction. She's absolutely nuts. So you can see my rooster popping his head up from his perch, popping his head out. And I've left that gap at the top for ventilation. You don't necessarily need to have a rooster in your coop. You know, something like that guy, you don't necessarily need to have him in, you know, in your flock. In a backyard setting, it might not be the most appropriate thing to have a rooster. If you've got neighbours that are going to likely to complain about the noise, then a rooster's not probably the best thing to have. I mean, a few years ago, when I first started keeping chickens, I had a really nice rooster, a really good one. He came up to about here. He was absolutely huge, magnificent animal. But one of my neighbours complained to the council, and they were going to take me to court and issue me with an ASBO. And for my American friends, that's an antisocial behaviour order, so it's a criminal record for having a rooster. I thought that was a little bit extreme, so we had to get rid of him. But this guy, he's friendly as anything, and we've got a decent bunch of neighbours that aren't complaining. Keep your neighbours on your side. Take them round some eggs, take them round some vegetables every now and then. Make sure everyone's on board with what you're doing and they know what you're doing. If they know you and they know what you're about, they're less likely to complain to people about you. But we're going to get out of the chicken coop, otherwise she's not going to go up before the door closes. You can have treadle feeders and all of that sort of thing, but especially in a backyard setting, we like to give them enough food just for the day, and at the end of the day, tidy up any food that's left over, put it away and use that the next day, and that way you're discouraging rats from appearing, because that's one of the most common pests that can happen with chickens, and that'll cause a nuisance for your neighbours and for yourselves. If you're locking your food away in the morning and at night, that's one way of reducing access to food for other vermin. We don't use anything fancy, we use low tech. We use a bowl for the feed and we use a bowl for the water, and we'll empty the bowl out every night, you know, and give them fresh water in the morning. We've got more eggs in the incubator, so you'll be able to see the progress of those chicks going from egg to chick to fully fledged flock birds. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for regular updates, and I'll give you regular updates on my Patreon as well. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.